Okay, who else out there is confused by paper? The weight, the GM, the GSM, the quality. Okay, so today I am going to show you why you don't necessarily need to spend so much money on your cardstock for your paper crafting. I'm going to go over a few things. I'm going to talk about the quality of the paper. I'm going to talk about the brightness of the white, comparing a few brands, price, and how they work with the things that we do most. So the first thing I want to talk about is the most confusing part to a lot of people, including myself, was the weight. So I want to show you first. I went on Amazon and thought, boy, I found a great deal on Neenah. Neenah is the most popular. Neenah seems to be the go-to for a lot of paper crafters. And I thought, oh yeah, I found a deal. I got the Neenah Exact 110 pound for $9.98 for 250 sheets. I hit a gold mine until I got it in the mail, and it was this. And I said, well, boy, that surely isn't the cardstock I was requesting. So I looked into it. Buyer error, because I did not look at the GM, also known as the GSM. So what is the GSM, and why do we care? That is the grams per square meter. That's what it stands for. In other words, a square meter of a specific type of paper is going to weigh a certain number of grams. It indicates how dense the paper is. So you want to make sure you're looking at that number. You may have heard this before, but it is essential. So no, I did not hit a gold mine. I did not get the paper I wanted for 4 cents a sheet. So that's out. Let's move on to cardstock that is more usable for what we do. We have the most popular brand of Neenah, 110 pound and 80 pound. So I have these two that I'm going to be looking at today. I also have a popular brand of the Recollections, which is from Micheal's. So we'll look at that as well. And then a brand that I discovered on Amazon, I think probably one of my subscribers told me about it, actually. I'm so sorry, I can't remember who, but a while back. And I looked into it, and it was a great find. So we're going to talk about Accent Opaque as well. These are the weights that you can get them in. And keep in mind, this is not the end-all be-all for cardstock. This is just what I'm going to be comparing today. But I make so many cards, and I work with cardstock so much, I just don't want to afford the Neenah anymore. So I'm so glad that I found these other alternatives. So we're going to talk about that. So the first thing I want to compare here on the screen is the weights. So the Neenah 110 is a 297 GM. The Neenah 80 pound is a 216 GM. Now if we compare that to the Recollections 110. So here I have a Neenah 110, a Recollections 110. This is 297, this is 300. Very comparable. The Accent paper cardstock comes in an 80 pound, a 100 pound, and a 120 pound. So the 80 pound is 216, exactly like the Neenah 80. The Accent 100 is 271, and the Accent 120 is 325. So these two 110s fall within this number. So that makes sense, 100, 110, 120. So that's the first thing to look at. The second thing is the whiteness of the paper. So if that's an important attribute, I'm going to say comparing the Neenah and the Recollections, theirs is very, very similar in color. So if you look at these, I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up, but I'm going to tell you they're virtually identical. It's not as bright white as the Accent, so I think that's helpful to see the difference. That's why I put the Accent in the middle, so that you can see the Accent is a much brighter white cardstock. I'm splitting hairs. If I pulled this up and put it against a piece of yellow cardstock, this is absolutely going to look super bright white. So I'm just saying in comparison to other whites. The most important thing as to why I'm switching cardstocks is the price. I've put the prices up here on these actual cardstocks so you can see for yourself. And I'm going to get to that right away before we do any comparison as far as ink blending and all those things, because this is an important feature. So the Neenah 110, let's talk about that for a second. This is the most expensive cardstock and the most popular of the brands that are used. So Neenah 110, $51.99 for a pack of 250 if you buy it in bulk. Yes, you can get it elsewhere in smaller packages. That's true too. But I'm just talking about the best cost comparison. So $51.99, 250 sheets. That brings you to 21 cents a sheet of cardstock. The Neenah 80 pound is $32.50 for a ream of 250, and that's 13 cents a sheet. The Recollections, you can get, I put $7.99 because although it's $15.99 listed, you can use a coupon at Micheal's. This is the Micheal's brand. And that will put you at 100 per package at 8 cents a sheet. Already, if we're using a coupon, we are exponentially lowering the price of this cardstock. But this is only the 110. The 65 pound brand of Recollections I find to be too thin, but that's just that's my opinion, my personal preference. Let's move on to the Accent. So the Accent for the 80 pound is $14.09 for 250 sheets, and that's 6 cents a sheet. And that's without a coupon. That's just purchasing the 80 pound straight up from Amazon. The Accent 100 pound, $14.36 for 200 sheets, and that's 7 cents. So we go up a cent from the 80 to the 100. And the Accent 120 is $18.02 for 150 sheets, and that's at 12 cents a sheet. Okay, so if we're comparing weights, then you can see the difference for the heavyweight cardstock. Neenah, 21 cents. Accent, the heaviest, is 12, although I would highly recommend the 100. We'll get into that in a second. And the Recollections is 8 cents. You're cutting your cost of cardstock in half or more by not using this Neenah. If you love your Neenah, I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. Spend your money how you want to spend your money. I am in no position or qualified to tell you how to spend your money. This is just an option if you want to save on this bulk purchase. If Neenah's working for you, keep doing it. Do what you got to do. For those of you that are interested in saving money, this is a huge difference in cost comparison to me. More than 50% cut. So we talked about the weight of the cardstock. We talked about the price comparisons. We're going to get into playing with the paper and see what kind of results we get with the paper. Before we get into that, I do want to say the 120 is an extremely sturdy cardstock. I mean, this is obviously, it's 325 GSM, so that's heavyweight. We're going to fold it, we're going to score it, we're going to see how it works. But I do think that of the accents, my favorite is the 100 pound. I find it to be a great in-between. Obviously, it is literally in between the two. But I find it to be just the right amount of sturdiness for a card base, not taking up too much, not too thick for making cards. So this is probably my favorite pick for card bases of all of these choices. And then I love the 80 pound for all the other things. All right, but we're going to compare now in what they can do. And the first thing that we're going to do is ink blending. I want to tell you that there are multiple different ways to ink blend with different tools. I am opting for a sort of like a blending brush, makeup brush type tool to use for my ink blending, and I'm going to do it in both oxide or like a pigmenty ink and a dye ink. Okay, so those are going to be my choices to do this comparison. I am going to use two different brushes though. I'm going to use this brush for the dye ink, and I'm going to use this brush for my pigment inks, okay, just so that I don't cross-contaminate them and we get the truest result as possible. This is the closest thing I have to a lab, so bear with me because it is not going to be 100% perfect. Okay, so I'm going to start with, let's do the 80 pounds. I'm going to go in pounds to compare. All right, I have my accent 80 pound and my Neenah 80 pound. So let's start with the accent. And I want to try to keep the labels in there as much as I can, so that's why I'm going to just kind of blend off to the side here. I'm just going to put down a different surface underneath my cardstock. This is a super cheap silicone mat I got from Amazon, which serves a lot of purposes for what you want to do, but it's easy to clean up, and I got 3 to a pack it was really cheap. So anyway, okay, we're going to start with the Neenah 80 pound, and I'm going to do the dye ink first. This is Catherine Pooler Suede Shoes. I'm just going to put a little bit on my makeup brush here. and I am going to blend this in over the Neenah. Now you can build up your color as much as you want. So I'm going to put 2 applications of each of these colors onto the cardstock. This way you can see it show up, and then we have a good comparison. And when you're doing comparisons between things, this is if you're doing this in your own craft room, you want to make sure that you try to stick with the same technique for each one, because that's going to give you your truest tell. Because you want to compare apples to apples, right? You don't want to compare apples to oranges. So I am going to, and some of you might say, well, you're also building up more color on this makeup brush, which could be true too, but I went till it ran out on the Neenah as much as I could. Okay, so now I have my Neenah 80 and my Neenah 80 and my accent 80. Okay, I do not see any difference in the quality of the blending. To me, it's the same. Okay, so let's go with the pigment ink, since we're still on this cardstock here. And this is going to be Distress Oxide in the Maude Lawn color. We'll start with the Neenah. And we'll do two goes on it. Alright, and I will clean off my brush on my microfiber cloth. This way we start fresh. And here's the accent 80 pound. Alright, so now we have the Neenah and the accent in the pigment ink. Again, I don't notice any difference between the two of them. You're going to be able to build up your color. I don't notice any significant splotching. You can build up the color as much as you want on here. So, first test for ink blending for Neenah and accent, to me, looks the same. Alright, let's do the same with the 110 pound. I'm going to compare, I'm just going to do all 3 because they're all in the 100 range, so, or all 4. So I'm going to ink blend these and let you have a look. Okay, so here's our results for these 4 being compared. Let's see, how can I get this in the screen? Okay, so we have the Recollections, the Neenah, the Accent 100, Accent 120. Recollections, Neenah, Accent. So they all look pretty much the same to me. I mean, I don't even want to split hairs by saying this is lighter. It depends on how much you want to build up the color. I mean, they work well. I do have to say, though, changing to ink blending brushes or makeup brushes, that fine brushed type, really has changed the game as far as ink blending goes. Also, side note, I'm really glad it's leg day today because my arm is done. So that is the comparison for ink blending. The next comparison that's important is alcohol marker coloring. So if you've seen my video on affordable alcohol markers, I did a comparison of some affordable alcohol markers, and I colored them on both the Neenah 80 and the Accent 80. And I wanted to show you here that there is virtually no difference between the two. Switch into voiceover real quick to talk about this. So I did not notice a difference when coloring with these markers on these two different cardstocks here, the Neenah and the Accent. I did notice a difference in how the markers performed, but that's for that review video. So if you're curious, I was reviewing the Nuvo markers, Arteza, Parku, Ohuhu, Spectrum Noir brush, Master Marker brush, as well as our Ohuhu brush, and then also the Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend. That video is coming very, very soon. I also wanted to make sure that I showed you alcohol marker coloring on the Recollections brand. So this is the 110 brand. I think I used Arteza for these images here, but most importantly, really good quality alcohol marker coloring on the Recollections as well. So they look exactly the same. Now, pardon my outside the lines bleeding. The ones that did bleed, I redid them just to show that if you're paying attention to what you're doing and you're slowing down, you don't have to get that bleeding. So it's not the marker's fault or the paper's fault. So I was able to get nice clean versions. So yeah, I mean, they look the same to me as far as alcohol marker coloring. So that is a go. You can use alcohol markers, and this is a variety of alcohol markers on this cardstock. So I think that's a pretty good test that alcohol coloring is good. So if you're a go-to colorist on your Neenah 110, then you can use the 100 or the 120 for your in the Accent if you're going to try out the Accent. Okay. Another question that I get asked is what mediums you can use other than when you're ink blending or alcohol markers on this cardstock. You can use colored pencils. There is better cardstock for colored pencils. You want cardstock with a little bit of, they call it tooth in there, so it can blend the colored pencil together, but you can color with colored pencils. You cannot get blends on this cardstock with water brush markers. That won't work. You need something with a smoother surface like Bristol Smooth cardstock or watercolor paper for your watercolor brushes, so keep that in mind for that medium. Okay, the next question that I'm asked a lot is how it scores and folds. And so what I'm going to do is cut up this cardstock, and then we're going to test out the fold of it. Okay, let's look at folding the cardstock. I hope you'll forgive that I'm using the same cardstock. I didn't want to waste paper. So the first thing that I did was I have two sheets. I have one that I scored with my scoring tool. This is my EK tools, and I like to do that to get a more precise folding, but not everybody does that. So I did one with and one without, and we're going to look at how the paper scores and folds. Okay, so scoring is fine. Scoring is across the board. You can score pretty much any cardstock. So you can see my line there, and I'm going to fold it over. And I am going to use my bone folder. I'm going to use my bone folder to press down the cardstock. And it lays flat. This is the Neenah 80. And you do not get any cracking or creasing in that, or you don't get any cracking or breaking on the cardstock. And it folds pretty flat. So that's the Neenah 80. And let's do this with by hand. Go this way. So when you're folding cardstock, I don't normally fold it like this, but I presume that's just the way. And then reinforce it with a bone folder. And that way I didn't get any cracking at all either. So Neenah 80 is good to go. Neenah 110, this is my scored piece. Neenah 110, no breaking. Looks good. And I'm sure if I pressed it down a little bit harder, I'll probably lay as flat as it can. Okay, that's that. And then can we do this by hand without a score tool? This is the more sturdy cardstock. And what happens when we do that? It's not as clean as a fold, and I am getting a little bit of breakage at the top. But I did not get that with the scored piece. So just keep that in mind. So the paper has the ability to not do that. But I did get a little bit of, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that breaking. Maybe, yeah, right there. You can kind of see it right here. Okay. All right, so the 80-pound pre-scored. Looks good. Looks clean. Yeah, looks good and clean and lays flat just like the Neenah 80. Let's do this by hand now. By hand is not perfect. It's a little bit fuzzy on the top here. So that's, yeah, it's definitely not as clean as it was with the scored one. All right, let's do the Accent 100. This is the scored sheet. Well, I'm reinforcing my desire to score first here because it's actually making things a lot smoother. This is perfect and smooth, and this is the 180. Let's do it by hand and see what we get. This isn't meant to be a scoring demo, but it's turning out to be that. Okay, this one, yeah, not as clean. You're going to get a little bit of that fuzz and kind of breakage. Not breakage, noticeable breakage, but definitely I can see it. I mean, like, maybe it is noticeable. I can definitely see it between the two. Yes, I can see that difference. Okay, 120. This is a very, very sturdy cardstock. So I don't know. I'm going to do it by hand, but I think scoring is definitely the best way to go. Clean. It's very clean. It does pop open just a little bit here. It's a very heavy cardstock. So again, just keeping that in mind. Let's see if I can flatten it anymore. No. So very clean though as far as the score line goes, and the fold line rather. And let's do this one by hand. Okay, yeah, it's scoring first of your cardstock is a recommendation I would definitely make. You're just not going to get that clean look like you are when you don't score it. So let me see. If you take a look, I'm putting the gray so that you can see it in contrast here. Hopefully you can see that. That is noticeable to me. This is without scoring it. This is with scoring it. So recommended to score your cardstock. We're discovering things other than just whether or not the cardstock is good here. All right, this is Recollections. This is the pre-scored. Looks good and clean. Folds nicely. Let's do the by hand. By hand, this one came out very clean. So Recollections is good for either not scoring it first or scoring it. So, okay, so all the cardstock folds really well. Great results when on all of the cardstock equally when you score it. That I can say across the board. And yeah, so the cardstock does a lot of the things. So my recommendation is to look elsewhere for cardstock if you want to save some money, because the Neenah to me is one of the priciest cardstocks out there, and there are very good cardstocks that can do the same thing as we saw today. So I hope this video was helpful for you in trying to decipher which cardstock might be the best one for your craft room. I will list everything I used in the video below. Again, be on the lookout for some upcoming review videos and hit subscribe so you don't miss those from me. I will look forward to seeing you in the comments section, and until next time, I hope you have a fantastic week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.